Hello and welcome to Job Talk with SP Jain School of Global Management. I'm Dr. CJ, your host, and we're broadcasting from the Innovation Department at SP Jain's Singapore campus. This show is a tribute to Car Talk, but gives you a chance to ask questions about jobs, work, and careers. So if you have a work-related question or problem on any topic, doesn't have to be today's theme, just send an email to jobtalk@spjane.org, and our secret moderator will pass it to us. You're anonymous. The moderator's anonymous. I think you might be a priest or a secret agent. No one will tell me who it is. We'll either help you solve your problem or at least help you laugh and know you're not alone. My guest today is Parminder Singh, a C-suite executive from Mediacorp, and our theme for the day is innovation. Taking a job in an innovative organization or making your organization innovative. Hi, Perry, and it's lovely to see you tonight. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Hi, CJ. Very nice to see you and very excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. So everybody has seen your bio, and we've been flashing that up while we did the happy music leading up to this session. So everybody knows who you are, but maybe not everybody knows that you have taken a leadership role in innovation at Mediacorp. So I'd like to know, what have you done to make Mediacorp more innovative? What are the key things that were important to help you in that? And what did you learn along the way? What are some crazy happy things that you found out?
Sure. Let me just back up a little bit before I talk about Mediacorp, CJ. I mean, if I look back at my career, I mean, I see three broad buckets of experience. I spent some time in India in large companies like IBM and Apple. I was running marketing and sales for Apple in India, running marketing for IBM. So that was the first phase. I joined the internet industry quite early in 2007. Google had just IPO'd, and when I joined Google from IBM, it was still a debatable decision. I remember people asking me, why would you want to leave an established company and go to a new company which is not really proven?
Back
So
then, that was the question.
that was the question. That was really a question being asked to me. That this is not a proven model, right? Google had just bought YouTube. Search was there, but it was not the behemoth that we know it now. We just bought YouTube for $1.6 billion. It was still seen as a site which does dog and cat video. It doesn't have a business model. Of course, there was no Android and lots of other things. But I was an early entrant. I just felt that I need to, internet is the future. And let me just look around and see which is the most exciting company doing some exciting work on the internet. And there was Google. And so Google, I was in Google for 6 years. I started in India running sales for them for some of their divisions. Then I moved to Singapore to run one of their businesses for APAC. It's a display business. And then I moved to Twitter to set up Twitter in Asia. So I spent about 10 years in Google and Twitter, really understanding the internet from search to display to social to programmatic, and really
And,
the growth of the internet industry.
and
Yeah.
that was before they were big behemoths. They were still kind of
Uh,
startup feely. A
yeah,
little.
that's right. And Google was just after the IPO 2007, so it wasn't really the big behemoth that it is now.
Okay.
It has just IPO'd. Twitter, I joined just before the IPO, so yes, I mean it was pretty big, but
Great.
it's still, that was in 2013. But
Uh-huh.
but I got a ringside seat into internet technologies and how internet can scale
Mm.
businesses, how internet can shape businesses. And I really spent the last 9 to 10 years in Asia Pacific consulting businesses, going to them and explaining to them how Google technology or how social can really help them scale, can really help them solve their business problem, which could be branding problem, could be demand generation, could be any business problem, because internet has a role to play in pretty much all walks of operation that a company has. And then the last 5 years, 4.5 to 5 years, I joined MediaCorp with a mandate to. It was a triple mandate. One, MediaCorp, for those of you who don't know about MediaCorp, we are the national media network in Singapore. We run a bunch of TV channels, radio stations, OTT platform, audio platforms, You might have heard of our, for those who are not familiar, might have heard of Channel News Asia, which is a fairly large news network across Asia. So primarily a media player, started as a broadcaster way back as a TV and radio business. And like a lot of TV and radio business, uh, definitely is at the throes of disruption, right? Here comes Google and Facebook, and for a company which is dependent on advertising for its revenue, it's been a huge change over the last few years to see a big chunk of their revenues, advertising investments, go towards Google and Facebook. So, like a lot of other media companies, Mediacorp was in this position. We're wondering what's our next media business model? How do we make sure that we are not a disrupted, but we are actually, benefit from the disruption and the technological changes that are happening around us? And so the mandate was threefold. One
Mhm.
was look at our existing business, which was at that time primarily TV and radio, and see how can we, use some of the tricks that you've learned at a Google or a Twitter or an Apple, and see what we can do and how can we make this businesses more efficient. That's number one. Number two was drive new business models, drive new sources of revenue, create new properties. That's number two. And number three, and very important, is people. How do we make sure that we change the culture of the company and create, turn this company into a more innovative, collaborative, just a more confident workforce, right? So, because I believe, disrupt or innovation, any innovation or disruption happens at the intersection of three things: business, technology, and people. All
Mhm.
three have to be in sync. And it's the intersection of these three things that's where innovation really happens. I mean, let's say you have a great business model, but if you do not have the technology to back it up, the business, will not survive. At the same time, if you've got the business and technology right, but you don't understand the people, you
Mhm.
don't even know whether the people have the capability, the capacity, or the right culture to carry forward that business and technology model that you have. It's of no use, right?
And you've got to understand not only the people who are working with you, but also your customers, because this thing you're talking about right now, the understanding people, tech, and business models, that's design thinking as well.
Absolutely.
Finding
Yeah,
and nailing it with the tech and the business model.
absolutely. So, you're absolutely right. I mean, you need to first understand, do a bit of an audit of what is the skill set I have? Now, what kind of leadership skills do I have? What kind of working skills do I have? What kind of culture is prevalent in this organization? And try to see what needs to be changed, right? Like any company, yes, there are good people whom you have to upskill. At the same time, sometimes you have to make a decision to bring new talent, fresh talent, just to make that change in the organization. And you take the existing workforce through a series of programs to make sure that whatever business or technology vision you have, they can take it forward, because ultimately innovation has to be done at the grassroots. It's never top down, isn't it?
So what you're saying is you've got to assess yourself, assess your whole team, assess your culture, in addition to understanding the business and the innovation opportunities. How do you do this sort of self and team assessment?
Yeah. So there are signals over there, right? I mean, firstly, for instance, I'll give you one very simple example. In today's world, we are moving from an institutional model to a network model. What do I mean by that? Earlier, there were these, most companies were large institutions. Everything would happen within the company, uh, from top to down, and they were self-sufficient. If you look at
Mhm.
the companies that are succeeding now, understand how networks work. I won't even talk about the gig economy. Everybody talks about the gig economy. Let's leave that aside. Even if you take a company like Apple, which is not considered a gig economy company, look at something like an iPhone. The reason iPhone is successful is not just because it's an excellent piece of hardware, but because they have an app store which has those wonderful apps, and those apps are not created by Apple. Those apps are created by companies that are not Apple. So Apple has figured out a way to leverage the power of networks, and all successful companies leverage the power of network. They need to be able to understand what's their place in the ecosystem and how do they communicate with the rest of the world. Now, the same thing applies to people as well. Gone are those days where you could work as a command and control manager and say, "This is my team. I'm going to focus on my skill set, my team, and leave it at that. You need to be able to understand what's your place in the ecosystem, leverage other skill sets, leverage other functions, work with other teams, and bring solutions. So, if I take the example of Mediacorp, instead of just going to our client and saying, here's my TV channels, this is a media plan for you, you need to turn it around and say, this is not about just media because media has got commoditized. I'm bringing to you a solution, and that solution can be done by people within MediaCorp, can be done by people with outside of MediaCorp, and you need to be able to figure out how to piece together the solution. And for that, very important is communication. And I
Mhm.
felt that we probably do not communicate as well as we should. And as a leader, you have to lead by example. So there are a bunch of things I did, and these are very practical things that we implemented. Number
But if
one,
wait.
yeah,
If I can stop you for just a moment, you also you mentioned Apple, you mentioned Steve Jobs, and one of the things you're talking about is being humble enough to say, yes, we're a company that's good at these things, and here's what we're not good at.
yeah,
Here's the
absolutely,
strategy we pursue, the things we do. Here's the things we don't do.
absolutely,
And we've got to be
absolutely.
able did you guys go through an exercise to determine what is it you do, what is it you don't do? Otherwise,
Absolutely.
you end up trying to do everything and you can't do anything well.
Yeah. No, we did a lot of introspection and try to figure out what is it that we're really good at. And we
Yeah.
found that there are two things that we do very well: storytelling and news dissemination, right? So those are two constants. All of the things that
Mhm.
we were doing beyond storytelling and news, we said we're not going to do it and let others do it. So a great example is we started something called a MediaCorp Partner Network, which is the
Uh-huh.
biggest digital network in Singapore now, where we tied up with people who are specialists in their domain. So, for example, a partnership with the Asian parent who are specialists in parenting, or a partnership with ESPN who are specialists in sports, or 99 or
Sports.
and so on, right? Because we can't do everything. You're absolutely right. So you need to, they say that do what you do best and hyperlink the rest, right? So we understood what we do best, and you hyperlink the rest because there's this thing called internet, which helps you create a model, a structure through which you can leverage the competencies of other people and create a shared revenue model. So that's exactly what we did. Absolutely right. And I'm coming back to the communication part, super
Yes.
important. And I think there are all managers need to be able to figure out the micro signals and understand is the
Mm-hmm.
communication seamless or not. And if it's not, you need to lead by example. And what do I mean by that? So for the first, when I was new, for my first year, every Sunday I would send out a note to my team, the entire team, called snippets, where I tell them about what I did last week and what I plan to do next week. It came as a bit of a shock to my team that why is he telling us what is he doing? But the idea was that this is an open communication organization. I'm not just entitled to ask you what you're doing, but you're entitled to know what I'm doing as well, right? And if I can lead by example, at least I can set the tone that all managers, everyone is expected to openly communicate. And we do not need to perceive information as a power wielding tool. There's no point
No.
hiding information, right? Be open about it. So, so that's one thing we did. I also felt that we need to be better at giving feedback. There is no way you can have, for instance, the kind of solutions we are giving to our clients. The feedback, whether the solution is good enough or not, has to come from the team. I cannot be the gatekeeper, or I cannot have a few managers acting as a gatekeeper. So how do
And
we
it's got to
make?
be 360, right?
Sorry,
And it's got to be 360, right?
it's
It
got to
can't
be
be just, feedback going up to down and then no information ever comes up because the information really is at the bottom of the organization, even though the
absolutely. It has
powers.
to be visible. I mean, and anyone should be able to give feedback to anybody else, right? No matter what your rank
Yes.
is, no matter what your
Yeah.
seniority is. And on any typical month, we sell hundreds of proposals. How do we make sure that you cannot create a quality control team which is sitting in a central ivory tower through which each proposal goes? Because that's going to slow things down. So you have to create a culture of feedback. You have to normalize people asking questions. So one of the
Yeah.
fun things we did for 2 years was a session called Pitch and Pizza, where we would get all our salespeople to come to the central atrium from which they were visible to the entire organization. We'll all sit on the stairs. These people will share the solution they're presenting to the client, and everyone would give feedback open. It was all open. Imagine it was very unnerving to begin with for a lot of people, because you are presenting in front of hundreds of people and you are getting asked questions and getting feedback in front of everyone. But soon people realize, and gradually people realize, that it's okay to be vulnerable. You once you normalize vulnerability and you let people know it's okay if you're not perfect. This is within friends, right? This is for your improvement, for your betterment.
That's the hardest thing that I have found in innovation. If you're going to co-create, then you have to share junk. You got to share little scribbles on your post-it and spit and tape and chewing gum, unless you're in Singapore. But yeah, and so for a consultant or a performer, you are a media company.
Yeah.
Showing something less than perfect is hard.
It-
How are
it-
you able to really get that culture going?
Yeah. Again, I would say you have to make it fun, right? The pitch and pizza sessions were really
Yeah,
important, because
yeah,
week after week after week, we would every
yeah.
Friday, we would just gamify the entire feedback and vulnerability session. We'll have pizzas, we're giving feedback openly, making fun, cracking jokes, and people realize that it's okay not to have the most perfect presentation. It's fine.
Hmm. Hmm.
Also, the leader has to demonstrate vulnerability himself, right? So I came from a different industry. I came from a digital industry. I didn't know anything about TV and radio, and I had absolutely no question in asking questions. And so if there was some term that I didn't know in the TV world, I would just ask the question, and when people see that their leader is vulnerable, he's asking questions, hopefully that sets a tone that it's fine. It's fine to ask questions. It's fine not to be perfect. It's fine to be vulnerable, right? And once you create that culture, then I think it's infectious. Once people see others asking questions, seeking feedback, accepting feedback, there's something infectious about it, isn't it?
Okay, so then everybody feels like they're free to do it as well.
Absolutely.
I've just been informed that it's time for a fun fact. Um, Now, I picked out a little fun fact today on innovation because you are talking about creating an innovation culture. I'd love to know, did you know the tin can was patented in 1810? The tin can opener was not invented for another 48 years. So I'm kind of picturing a lot of people with cans of soup wandering around with their screwdrivers trying to punch the damn thing in the top, trying to get their soup. Anytime you do innovation, you're going to come up with part of what's needed and not the whole thing. You just
Yes.
said that you've got to lead by example, but ultimately, who is winding up doing all the innovating in your company? Is it top down, bottom up, just everybody? And do you come up with situations where you've invented something, but you've got another piece that is really needed to make that useful?
Yeah. Yeah, you can always start by introducing a few things top down, but that's never sustainable, right? If you need to
Yeah.
be able to be innovative, because the world around us is changing rapidly, right? What worked for you last year will not work for you this year or next year. So constantly innovating. And innovation can never always be top down. So for instance, in the world of media, I cannot lay claim to the fact that I understand all the new social mediums that are out there. Look, I know I can use TikTok, but I cannot use TikTok the way a 20-year-old can. And I need to
Yeah,
be
my
honest.
daughter does a lot better.
Exactly, right? Or TikTok or Snap. So, it's important for leaders to not just introduce some ideas, but really create a system or a flywheel of innovation, which can help turn out ideas from within the organization. So
Yeah,
that,
and it
yeah,
takes a lot, like you said, the communication. And you've got to have the beginner's mindset and be learning from everyone in the organization and letting them know that you're excited to do that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think this is where I think leaders should create a system. It does not happen on its own
Yeah.
organically. So what
Yeah.
what has worked for us very well is a program we call LIT, Leadership Innovation Transformation, where we ask for problems openly across Mediacorp, and we say, what are the problems we should be solving? And there are some really interesting problems people have suggested. And then we say, all right, these are the 10 problems that we've chosen for the next 6 months. Who would like to work on these problems? So the problems
Yeah.
are bottoms up, the groups are bottoms up, and we've had some amazing projects that have come out of it. One of the projects that we launched recently is called Social Hub, which is one of the largest social influencer platform in Southeast Asia. That project was a result of the lit project, the bottom up innovation. Somebody said, you know what, we have so many influencers, we've got all these brands, there is no system to match make brands with
Yeah.
influencers. Can't we create a system? We said, yeah, okay, so why don't you go ahead and do it? And we promised this team of 6 people some investments, gave them some time, and they've come up with this amazing product. And likewise, there have been several other products. So that flywheel of innovation, where it's not
Yep.
just down, but it's 360, is super
Yeah.
important.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I've got a fun little news item. Did
Mhm.
you know? And then I'm going to ask you a question about this. Um, happened along Forbes. So, have you heard there that it's reported in Forbes regarding the great disconnect that a lot more employers than workers want to return to office 5 days a week, a physical office. 76% of employees do not want to return to full time physical office work, and 93% want flexibility when they work. How has COVID and the requirement to go virtual impacted your innovation efforts? Has it helped? Has it hurt? Right?
So two different things here, Tudor. One is, for us, luckily we had some of these systems in place.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, we had this project going to really root out great innovative projects from bottoms up. We had most of our projects in place. So in terms of just pure operations and running of these projects, I don't think we missed anything. We just had to transplant the entire thing onto the virtual world. But there
Mm-hmm.
are two things that I think through which we were impacted, right? Initially, we realized that we were just spending way more time in meetings than we used to, because it's so easy to get don't have to go to a physical place. People are just spending way more time in meetings. And
Mm-hmm.
because it was an assumption that we are all working from home, so what's the problem in this person taking a meeting after office hours, right? So that was an assumption, right? uh,
Right.
but we had to sensitize ourselves and our managers that just because we're working from home does not mean we can intrude that space between work hours and non-work hours. So we have to be way more sensitive than we are. That's one. So we did have to discipline ourselves and draw some boundaries and sensitize and coach our managers to be sensitive about people's personal spaces. Super important. Second is, I do miss sometimes this feeling of whiteboarding, just crowding around the whiteboard.
Yep.
Everybody,
Yep.
I was a big believer. I had a big whiteboard in my room. I would, whenever we had a problem, I just tell my team, just come. And there's something nice about having this visual spatial space where you put a problem and then you let it linger there, and then you attack it from different angles. People are giving their feedback view. That's the thing. There are whiteboards available, virtual, but I'm still looking for a solution. That's what
Mural.co.
was that.
But Mural.co is one of my favorites.
Okay.
But these mural and whiteboard groupy things online, it isn't quite the same, is it?
It's not the same. It's not the
It's
same.
not.
So that's something I do sometimes occasionally miss. The
Mhm.
other thing that was, I was made aware by a new employee, and this is a classic new employee problem. People who joined during the times of COVID. Uh,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I normally do a monthly session with all the new employees. We used to have breakfast session over coffee and sandwiches. Now it's virtual breakfast. And I was
Yep.
telling them, look, it's all the same. We've transplanted, we've given everyone great tools. So I don't think there's any difference between working in the office or virtual. He said something very interesting to me. He said, you've been working in this company for a few years. You know all the people, you guys have hung out together. So you have a social capital. I do not have a social capital, and you have to help me create that social capital. And I thought that was very profound and very
That's right.
meaningful. And that's something that we've been very conscious of, that if you're a new employee who is joining in the times of COVID and you have seen only two people in the organization, the way uh, feel about the company, your sense of belongingness is different, and we need to work towards
Yes.
that.
Yeah. So, and innovation depends so much on that social capital, and um, sometimes chance encounters. As a matter of fact, someone was doing a study, and really good ideas were coming out of this particular group of friends.
Mhm.
And the managers couldn't figure out, well, they're from different departments, they're different ages, male, female, different races. I mean, what connects these people? And then one manager was looking at the list of names. Oh my gosh, I know what it is.
Mhm.
They're smokers.
Ah,
And they would all go outside the building and
yeah,
stand around having a smoke.
yeah,
And while they would stand around there with nothing to do, they would
of course.
start bouncing ideas, making
Brilliant.
connections, and that actually translated into innovation.
Brilliant.
What have you been able to do to help these new folks, number one, create this social capital, social networks, and number two, keep the ones strong that already exist in the company?
Yeah. I'm a big advocate of having meetings without any agenda. So one of the suggestions that I
Oh,
my team is do something called snacks. Snack stands for short, no agenda catch-ups. Uh, these just random meetings, just encounters in the lobby, in the lift, water cooler, pantry, those are gone. We are having meetings, a lot of meetings, but all these meetings are with people with whom we have some kind of a business work
yep.
with a specific agenda. What happened to all those conversations that used to happen without any agenda? The smokers, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to normalize these short, no agenda catch ups. Just say, hey,
Hmm.
I haven't met you. We used to bump into each other in the elevator. Let's just have a chat. There's no agenda. Let's just talk, right? I think it's important to do that because that is a very important part of being in a shared space, an office space, right? So I don't think we are there yet, but we are definitely trying to do these little micro things to bring back the same feeling as we were in the office. But of course, we are going back to your earlier point. We are a flexible workspace. We have announced to our employees that we will be a flexible workspace. Now, the definition of flexibility is something each department, each function will have to figure out. And I'm guessing it will change. Like if you're a cameraman in a newsroom, your flexibility is very different from if you're a salesperson or if you're a marketing
Or a
person
writer.
or a writer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that'll evolve as by and by.
I do have a question here from our secret moderator. I don't know who the person is. What is the best way to keep your team engaged and innovative, especially during this time when we're working virtually most of the time? Can you throw some more light on this? That would be great. So the snack meetings, I think, is awesome because
Yeah.
one of the first things that I learned when I started working was MBWA, management by walking around.
Yeah.
So I was never more productive than when I started taking a coffee cup around to all my teams and just saying hi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
stand there with a coffee cup, they'll tell me things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the little snack meeting maybe via WhatsApp would
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. No, we do little. We have these little micro practices that we've implemented. So, for instance, we do a lot of learning programs with our teams, and we try to gamify a lot these days. So
Mhm.
we tied up with a company called Service based in London, and they would have these learning modules every fortnight. At the end of every module, we would have a little competition where people will put in their answer in their Zoom box and we'll declare the winners. So you really need to bring that sense of belonging, a little bit of healthy competition alive, uh,
Dare we say fun play?
fun play, of course.
We need to play sometimes, and that
Absolutely.
awakens part of our brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've done within my team, though, you talked about the WhatsApp group, is we have this little Friday good news tradition. What we try to do is every Friday, someone or the other from the team puts up a good news in the WhatsApp chat group, talking about a win or a client
Oh,
testimonial or a success story, so that we actually start the weekend on a very happy note, and that lingers on with the team, right? So these little things, little micro practices, it's the answer. I think is not always in these big things, but you can institute micro
hmm.
practices, little things here or there, which can have an outsized effect on how the teams behave and their sense of belonging and bonding with each other.
And I think it was Clay Christensen who said, what is culture? Culture is just a collection of what works.
Wow,
And
that's a lovely
over
way.
time, something works and someone spreads that tip on to someone else. And then, so I love what you've said. It's a collection of little things. Now, I'm going to ask for the bottoms up perspective. You as a leader, give us the top down perspective.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you bottom up, but first, we did receive on our email address, jobtalk@spjain.org, we got a question. Okay, and I've changed the wording a little bit. I am working in a reputed medical college, and a few employees gang up, including female clerks, and put questions and complaints about the honest employee. And I assume that the honest employee is this person. All the allegations are fake, but the majority on the other side include HR staff and a few others. In every case, these female accusers are not in the right, but our laws are inclined towards them. I know I'm honest, and few people are on my side. I've decided to fight the case in court and make everyone aware that if you're right and pure in heart, then fight for yourself. Do not support wrong people and bad management. Shout for justice and fight for the right things. What's your reaction to a situation like this?
Firstly, I would say, it is a tough and intense situation that the person who's asked find himself in, and I would say, look, just hang in there. Firstly, I think, and make sure that you're okay, you're mentally okay, everything is okay. These things can be sorted out, right? So now, to me, the first reaction is this, CJ. If there is no wrongdoing involved, is there is nothing wrong that the person has done, then the presence of conflict indicates an absence of communication channels.
It's a communication thing again. You are a communication company. You're doing it as your job, and you
Abs-
really do it inside as well.
if there is absolutely been no problem, and it's just but there is still a conflict, there is somewhere the communication has broken, or the communication didn't really exist the way it should have been. Now, to be fair to the person who's asked this question, communication is never a one-sided thing. It has to be done on both sides, and normally it's the job of the organization to provide communication channels, to make sure that there's those channels exist. Now, the channels could be between the individuals, between the peers, or the person should feel sufficiently confident to talk to someone in the organization who is neutral, number one, who has no reason to be vested on either side, and is in a position to make some decisions and do something about it. And if the person is not being able to do that, maybe there's a lack of psychological safety, right? Maybe you're not feeling confident to approach someone and talk to them about the situation. But I would say, look, you can always go to the court, but and fight a case, but that's normally the last resort, especially when it's about your coworkers, it's about people that you have to live and work with. Uh, I would say find that person. I'm sure if it's a big medical college, is running successfully, they must
Yeah.
have created some channel of communication which allows it to function, right? It
Yeah.
cannot function otherwise. I'm sure there is somebody out there who is neutral, doesn't have any reason to be biased on either side, and can take an impartial view of this and then create that communication channel, which doesn't seem to exist right now or has broken down.
There's the wonderful thing, a wonderful concept, job called the ombudsman
Yeah.
in an organization. And it's like mom.
Yeah.
If you can't get justice anywhere and something's wrong and nobody's listening to you, go to the ombudsman. It doesn't matter what the problem is, any problem at all. And I think that's a super useful thing because organizations get so structured, but when there's a problem that isn't dealt with in the existing structure, there's no
Yeah.
structure to fix it.
Yeah.
And HR should have these kinds of communications and conflict resolution
Absolutely.
people, processes. But what if those are the people who are attacking this guy? What if there is a system, but it's a dirty or bad system?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I mean,
then,
yeah,
please.
I guess it's not just about creating that channel, but also assuring people that you have the psychological safety
Mm,
to be able to use the channel, and you'll be fine. You'll be okay if you're using the channel. You're not going to be victimized. We're not going to treat you any differently because you have given us some tough and harsh feedback, right? So somewhere there
mm,
is some breakdown, right? And I think it's the job of your right, the CHRO, or the CEO itself. Like in our company, for instance, we have a simple email called Ask CEO, and anyone can write to the
ask
CEO.
who?
Ask CEO, that's it, right? Ask CEO.
Brilliant.
And just
Ask the CEO.
right, if you have something on your mind which you think is not getting sorted, just ask CEO. And so I think I would encourage this individual to really find out who could be that person who's in that position of authority and be able to create the communication channel.
Very awesome. And you know what? It now occurs to me, now that you've talked about it, that the moment you put in a channel to fix things, you got to have a channel to fix that channel.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
that one's broken. Hey,
Yeah.
I want to draw your attention to a couple of comments.
Mhm.
Diana has sent us a comment. Love the Friday good news. I shall adapt that. That's great.
Wonderful.
And Vikas has said, I had no idea this job talk would be so interesting and informative. It's all due to great folks like you, Perry.
Right.
Um,
Thank you,
so now
Vikas.
I want to just spend a couple more minutes because we're going to get short on time. But I want to spend a couple more minutes on, okay, you've told us about making an innovative culture as a leader. But what if it's just some newbie who's joined an organization?
Yeah.
They'd like it to be more innovative. So, how do you find an innovative, fun place to work? And
Yeah.
if you can't do that, how do you make your workplace fun and innovative?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and this is from the point of view of a new employee or
Employee, just somebody low down on the food chain, like you when you started.
yeah. We've all heard of this, the famous Simon Sinek, principle of why. Each company needs to understand
Yeah,
its why. Why does it
yeah.
exist? I'm going to take it a level deeper and say, a lot of leaders do a good job of explaining the company's why, but don't
Mm.
connect that why to the employee's why, and that's super important, right?
Ah, ooh, yeah.
And that connecting the dots makes all the difference between employee feeling motivated and being
Hmm.
part of the transformation and innovation, right? How even if the company has found its reason of existence, let's say at Mediacorp we think, okay, storytelling is a reason of existence, or news. A person who is going out there and selling an advertising solution to a client, how does that connect to this person? Right?
Hmm.
How does the digital transformation that we are undergoing impact the daily job, life, and career of this employee? And it's the job of the middle manager to make that connection, to have that whiteboarding session and
Yeah.
say, it's called, we call it the vision to task session. This is the company vision, this is your objective, and that's how the two are connected. And I can bet that for each and every employee, no matter what your function is, no matter what your job is, no matter what your objectives are, there is a way to connect the dots between what the company's why is and what the employee's why is. And that connection is super important. And once you make that connection, the kind of investment an employee makes in his career in the company's success is totally different. So I would urge all, and then the job becomes more fun, more meaningful. You feel that you are there for a higher
Mhm.
reason beyond just what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of things get solved if you make the connection between the company's why and the employee's why.
It's beautiful. And a lot of people talk about how hard it is to manage millennials. I'm like, hey, I've been a millennial for like 50 years now. Um, and the Genzis that come after them,
Mm.
because they care so much that when they put in a day of work, that it was a day worth their life, that there was something meaningful coming out, and that it's not just success, it's success with significance. So I love what you have just said, that you've got to connect both of those missions. Say, we've got another couple of comments here. Antonella has said, ask CEO is such a great idea. Thanks for sharing. And Ankur says, sir, at times it's tough to communicate to the respective person because there's lots of politics at the higher management. So then my question is, well, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? But I would say, there is this. Typically, I would say there are three channels available to anyone in a situation like this. One is people, up the chain of your hierarchy, your manager, your manager's managers, and so on, right? So that's one line. Second is there is the HR department, and I'm hoping that HR department is neutral. There is no politics because they really are not really directly in the line of business. And then, of course, there is a CEO, right? So you have all these three channels. Those are the really, three channels that are available, and usually one of these three works. Usually one of the three works.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
And if you're at the bottom of the organization, but you're having a key challenge and it's connected to values, that's probably a symptom of something big and important the CEO really needs to know about and make some changes about.
yeah, yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense.
And I also think that, normally it helps when you're presenting the way you're framing your problem or your situation. If you make it less person specific, more
Yeah.
about the situation, the conflict without
Mhm.
involving people, and how it can damage the company's culture and hence impact the company's business, that's more
Yeah.
productive. Sometimes it's just how we frame the problems. So it's really not about my not liking the person. Look, I may not like a person. Of course, we don't have to like everyone that we work with, but that should be besides the point. You have to
Yeah.
be honest about the situation, which is the fact that there is a situation which is not about my liking or not liking the person, but because it's not good for the company, it's not good for the culture, it's creating a certain situation which will ultimately, if it scales, if this situation scales, what really works for the CEO, by the way, is if you're going through a conflict and you are able to
Mhm.
convince the CEO that this particular conflict, if it scales multiple number of times, it will have a significant impact on your business.
Yeah.
And no CEO would like that. No CEO would like
Yeah.
that this situation, if it scales, will have an impact on the bottom line on the balance sheet. And that's one way to decouple the person with the problem. Keep the two
Yeah.
separate.
Yeah. And make it about the mission, not about personalities. We've got time for one follow-up question that Ankur has given us, and then we're going to have to do a puzzler and close. Ankur followed up with, and we don't want to be in the bad books. So it makes it tough for us to always use the ombudsman principle. Thus, good employees try to find new jobs. I'd love
Yeah,
to hear your view on the same.
yeah, yeah.
You're going to lose people.
Ankur, look. I know, that there is no perfect answer for this, but I would say if you have to eventually, you know, f- find a new job and people move on, right? People change jobs, right? Sometimes it's just your value system not in conflict or doesn't align with the value system of the company. And maybe both the value systems, there's nothing wrong in it. It's just that you have a different value system, and these things do happen. But here's what I would say: do take the final recourse of finding a new job after you are convinced that of three things. One is that you have spoken to the people that you have a conflict with. That's number one. Number two, you have explored all the communication channels available to you. It could be your manager, your manager's manager, your CEO, your CHRO, all the channels. And number three, you have framed the problem in such a way that this is not about the individual, but more
Mm.
about the situation you find yourself in.
It's about
Those
the
are the
business.
things you have to
It's
do,
not
right?
about,
And if
yeah.
it doesn't work, none of the three things work. Of course, look, I'm sure you're a talented person, and there are other opportunities for you.
Ah, I hate to say it, folks, but we are out of time for more questions. So we can hold on to our final question. It's time for a puzzler. All right. Now, this is the time in the show when we give you a puzzler to keep your creative juices going and to help you with some innovation. I'll give you a puzzler now, and every week we will give you the answer to the last week's puzzler and a new puzzler. Here it is. An office building window cleaner is busy cleaning windows on the 25th floor, really high up. He suddenly slips and falls, and yet he isn't harmed, despite not wearing any safety equipment or harness. How can this be? How did he survive the fall? All right,
And he's
that's our
not
puzzle.
Spider-Man. He's not Spider-Man, right? He's not Spider-Man,
And
right?
he's not Spider-Man. That's a hint. I will tell you he's not Spider-Man. So send us your answers at jobtalk@spjain.org. And it has actually happened again. As they say on Car Talk, you have squandered another hour. Well, actually, it's only 45 minutes listening to Job Talk. Thank you very, very much, Perry. You've shared with us some wonderful ideas, very great ideas, and some great experience. And everybody, we'll see you next week. Thank you, Perry.
Thank you, CJ. It was wonderful talking to you, and good luck to everyone who's listening. Well done, and I look forward to the next Job Talk.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.